So I was listening to Radio 4 the other day in the car after I dropped my wife at work, because apparently now I'm going to be a dad, I've become really, really old. And whilst I did, I had an epiphany, or a polyphony. So I heard on this program that the human voice is the most complex sound in nature, and actually the muscles that you use in the chest whilst exhaling in order to speak are capable of the same kind of refined movement and dexterity as the human hand. And it's something that can be trained, and most of us don't train our voices, and so we're only capable of regular speech. But if you focus on this, and if you take conscious effort to see what your voice is capable of, well, then you can do stuff like this. So that was Beardy Man, a beatboxer and comedian who is fascinated by getting the very most possible out of his voice and creating sounds that no one else can create.
I was constantly trying to extend my repertoire of noises to be the very maximum that it could be. I was constantly experimenting with these noises.
And what this made me really think about was the fact that there's just so much about the human body, so much that we're capable of, that we just don't train. There's so much untapped potential. And it's not just these kinds of abstract and strange skills like beatboxing, but also things that can affect our performance and our physical strength and our speed and our fitness and health, things that we just overlook because we haven't really thought about it, that if we were to put more focus on, more emphasis on, then we'd be able to see incredible benefits. And so in this video, I'm going to share some of the most interesting options for increasing your strength and performance that you might not have considered and that many people overlook. So to kick things off, I'm going to start with something that a lot of us do know about, but we still don't necessarily incorporate into our training. That's grip strength. This is a perfect example of something that could improve your performance incredibly and also your general health if you were to incorporate it into your training. Problem is, a lot of people assume that their grip is getting trained when they're lifting weights generally, so they don't need to spend specific time training that area, and at the same time they find it kind of boring. This isn't one of those mirror muscles, but actually training your grip has all kinds of incredible benefits. Not only is it important for a whole range of sports, as well as martial arts and self-defense for gripping onto things, as well as climbing and parkour, but it can also increase your strength by improving the grip that you have on the thing you're lifting, so you're wasting less energy holding onto it, and you can therefore focus more of your neural drive on pushing it or pulling it and generally moving it around. I've made a whole video on grip, finger and forearm training, so I'm not going to go into it now, but just a few things that you can start doing right away to make sure you're no longer missing out on this is to just make sure you're using those exercises that also do target the grip in a big way. So that means heavy deadlifts, that means things like weighted pull-ups and hangs. At the same time, you can do some things to increase the focus slightly on the grip, so that might mean using a wider barbell when you're curling, so you've got to grip onto it harder. It might mean removing the attachment on the cable pull down on the cable pulleys, just so you're pulling the actual cable itself. You can also use specific examples of grip training. That means things like rope climbing, it means things like fingerboard pull-ups. Build up to that, otherwise you can cause damage to your tendons in your fingers. At the same time, you can use things like grip trainers, finger push-ups. Check out the video and start incorporating grip strength into the rest of your training and see the results across all your lifts and all your performance. Okay, so something that I haven't talked about on this channel much before, and something that you should definitely consider looking into, is straight arm strength. So straight arm strength, of course, is your strength with your arms straight. Most of the movements that we focus on in the gym, if we're not gymnasts, involve having our arms bent or bending our arms. We're building our bent arm strength, but this doesn't have that much carryover to straight arm strength. And straight arm strength, whilst it might not look exciting because you're not moving something, is incredibly important for a range of other things. In particular, it's incredibly important if you want to build your ability to perform calisthenics skills. So for instance, the planche or the front lever. It also gives you more stability for a whole range of other movements, whether that's the bench press, whether that's push-ups or press-ups. I say press-ups, by the way, because I'm British, and also it's a bench press, isn't it? It's not a bench push. But anyways, building that straight arm strength will give you more stability that you can translate to a whole bunch of other things. At the same time, it also trains the ligaments around the elbows, and there's not really tons of other ways to train this. And if you don't, then it can cause injury, and especially if you're moving up towards something like the iron cross. You really need straight arm strength to be able to do stuff like that, and of course it has carryover. And I just hate the idea of being this really ripped, strong athlete or bodybuilder who has an entire aspect of their strength, like straight arm strength, missing. Of course, straight arm strength is crucial for a whole bunch of gymnastics movements, and many people will say that gymnasts are pound for pound some of the strongest athletes on the planet, so we can all stand to learn from them.
How much of the musculature in the upper arms, biceps specifically, comes from straight arm work versus some form of bent arm work?
The majority of the massive biceps they see is going to come from the straight arm work. Nothing put better mass on a bicep secondary from the ring strength than high volume rope climbs.
So I'm going to do a video on this in future. I'm going to look into it in a lot more depth. I've only just started incorporating it properly into my own training, but here are some things that you can start doing right away. First of all, obviously you can start training for those straight arm skills that I've been talking about, such as the planche, and ways you can do this include getting into the upper position in the press-ups, and then leaning forwards with your arms straight so that you're taking more weight onto your arms. At the same time, you can also practice doing things like crow pose or frog stand, just making sure to keep your arms locked out as you do. Just hold that position. You can also do a bunch of other exercises that aren't specifically aimed at building your straight arm strength, but just make them also benefit straight arm strength. So for instance, if you're going to do leg raises, why not do them on the dip bars and then keep your arms locked out? You should feel the tension in the elbows as you're doing it, and that way you're getting double benefit. You're training your abs and you're training your straight arm strength. You can also do a bunch of hanging type movements to train straight arm strength. That includes hangs, which also improve your shoulder range of motion. They improve, they decompress your spine, and this is something that we might have seen. They're great for grip strength, and this is something that we might have seen our ancestors doing again because, well, if you look at great apes, they spend a lot of time just hanging from branches. Dead hangs are actually really good for a whole bunch of stuff. I'm going to come back to them soon, so try incorporating those. You can use things like bodyweight shrugs in order to shrug dips in order to build the lower traps, and at the same time you can focus on the muscle specifically. Training the forearms will improve your straight arm strength because they help to brace the elbow, in particular the brachialis, which you can also train with hammer curls. And at the same time, anything that trains the shoulder girdle, the serratus muscles, is also going to benefit that. Oh, and ring push-ups, ring dips, RTO push-ups, rings turned out, where you're turning your arms. Rings in general are really good for building stability and that straight arm strength.
When you're on the rings, we need the grip turned out past parallel. Now, back in the day, Greg Glassman and I, Greg is he's a super bright guy, founder of CrossFit, but he just didn't understand why we would turn the rings past parallel. He thought it was just aesthetics. Coach, it's just aesthetics. Got to turn past parallel so that the brachialis is activated. All right, there's a reason that after all these years of CrossFit being on rings and doing thousands upon thousands of kipping pull-ups and dips and all this stuff, that there are no iron crosses unless they're a previous gymnast. All right, there's no homegrown CrossFitter who has an iron cross.
Something that's somewhat related to straight arm strength is the hollow body. So this is a position where you're bracing your upper body and your core in a similar manner to the arms during moves like the planche, and it will greatly help you to improve your control, your balance, and to get those awesome calisthenics skills. And basically, it involves contracting the upper body and the core and the abs in such a way that were you to lie on the floor, your small of your back would be touching the ground rather than raised from it. And if you get this right, then in the push-up position, you should feel as though if the roof was to collapse on your back, you'd be able to just hold it up. It's this rigid, rock-solid position that's perfect for preventing injury and for plugging all those holes in the kinetic chain, for being one strong, rigid, cohesive unit. Another more simple one is work capacity. Work capacity is basically cardio fitness, but in the context of whatever form of exercise it is you're interested in doing. This is one of the main things that is targeted in CrossFit, where the aim is to be able to do lots of different deadlifts in a row, lots and lots of pull-ups, and then a run, to be able to not just exert your strength once, but to be able to do it repeatedly without seeing flaws in your performance and your technique that ultimately lead to injury. But this is important for everyone because, as you know, if you've ever done lots of pull-ups, if you're capable of doing lots of pull-ups, often the reason you have to stop is not because your muscles are fatigued, but because you're exhausted and you start to feel a bit sick as a result. The same can happen in any kind of compound movement. So you need to build that cardio base in order to be able to perform your best no matter what you're doing. And this even translates to productivity and focus. A lot of people want to get more energy in their daily life. They don't think about running and generally improving their ability to exert energy over a long time. Running and doing various cardio forms of exercise is the best way to improve your performance in pretty much anything you're doing, because you've just got more energy and you're more efficient at using that energy. A lot of bodybuilders and people don't want to use cardio because they're afraid it's going to cause them to lose their muscle, or they find it boring. But there are fun ways you can train. I did a video on Metcon that you can look at, and at the same time I've done a video on why bodybuilders should train their cardio, because it actually makes them more anabolic. By lowering your heart rate, you actually are in a more anabolic state more of the time. There's lots of reasons to be doing cardio, and this is why you often see powerlifters who are training in a certain specificity, who are training for a particular goal, using cardio and other forms of training under the umbrella term general physical preparedness. This basically means that they understand that in order to perform their best in their specific skill, they need a general level of fitness as well. You can't be great at powerlifting if you have no cardio endurance. So make sure you're running or doing HIIT or some kind of cardio, even if that isn't what you're interested in getting better at specifically. So those are just a few examples of different training methods and concepts from different sports, fields, activities, practices that you can incorporate into your training to see massive performance improvements, both in the gym and in your life. Of course, I haven't covered everything here. There's lots more that we tend to overlook, and I couldn't possibly cover everything, but I am going to cover more. This is going to become a part 1 of 2 video because it's going to get insanely long otherwise. So I'm going to come back next time. I'm going to launch straight into it, and I'll see you then.